Hey everyone, welcome to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. In the Mobile User Acquisition Show, we talk about how to use mobile user acquisition strategies to grow your app quickly and capital efficiently. The Mobile User Acquisition Show is presented by me, Shamant Rao, mobile growth leader and founder and CEO of the mobile growth consulting firm Rocketship HQ. Each episode includes strategies, tips, and pointers from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition that you can use to unlock tremendous growth for your app in a sustainable and capital-efficient manner. Our guest today is Bozo Jankovic. Bozo is the business development manager at GameBiz, which is a boutique consultancy firm for games. Bozo works with free-to-play game developers, helping them grow their business by monetizing their games with ads. He handles all aspects of the ad monetization business, and he has worked with studios such as Wargaming, Creative Mobile, Nanobit, Desperados, and many more. This is the third episode where Bozo is presenting the course Ad Monetization 101. So definitely check out his course if you are interested in all things ad monetization and if you're interested in going much, much deeper on this. This, of course, is also our first episode on ad monetization on the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Today, we're going to talk about an underappreciated yet significant opportunity in ad monetization, native ads. This is a topic that I'm very curious about, primarily because it used to be something that was accessible only to big brands with massive teams and budgets, but this has become much more accessible to smaller advertisers and app developers of late. Very excited to welcome Bozo Jankovic to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Bozo, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Excited to have you because I've certainly heard very, very good things about the last class you taught at the Mobile Dev Memo Academy. And very excited to check out your course and certainly also to dive into all things ad monetization on today's interview.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to be joining your program as well.
Indeed. We're going to be talking today about native ads and the native ad monetization opportunity. And really, I think native, in my mind, comes across as one of those almost a buzzword, but you really seem to know and understand how to leverage it, but also leverage it for games at scale. And all of that is definitely something we're going to be diving into today. To start off, can you give us background about native ads? And obviously, these have been around even before mobile apps were a thing. So what did these look like prior to mobile apps?
Yeah, so that's a very good question because I feel that the term native advertising and native ads has seen a tremendous evolution over the years, and it's definitely something different to what it used to be a few years back. It probably makes sense to differentiate among several types of native ads, at least what they used to be. So the first type, I would say, is when brands are finding natural advertising spaces within the games, and so they start showing ads there. So think of billboards or pitch side ads or TV screens, anywhere where you might have seen the ad in the real world that's happening in the video game.
Right.
And this is probably the most where most of collaborations used to be back in the days. I know one example that basically got a lot of attention from mainstream media as well, and that is back in 2008, where when Barack Obama was running for presidency.
Right.
Actually, he was running ads in NBA Live game by Electronic Arts.
Yeah.
So that got a lot of attention from both from the industry, but the general public as well. And that's just one example of how things used to run. And then the second type I'd like to point out is where we take it a step further and we say, okay, there has to be a more natural fit between the brand and the game. So that led us to have farmers insurance offering to insure your crops in Farmville,
Right.
or for example, Century 21, which is offering real estate in We City city building game. So I'd say that, you know, this is the next step that the industry took. And finally, the third stage, at least in this life cycle of native ads, I would say is when developers and brands are not only focusing on in-game elements, but are actually expanding their collaboration to the real world as well. And one example your listeners and followers might be familiar with is when Niantic worked on their game Pokemon Go in collaboration with McDonald's in Japan. So what was happening is basically Pokemon Go turned McDonald's restaurants in Japan into Pokestops and Pokemon Go gyms.
Right.
And back in the days, it was reported, but not officially confirmed by either side, that basically Niantic was charging McDonald's anywhere between 15 and 50 cents for each unique visitor. So for Pokemon Go players that were visiting McDonald's stores. So this is basically how things used to work before.
Yeah, crazy, right? And I would imagine that for McDonald's to do that deal or Obama to do that sort of deal, they would have needed fairly big partnership teams or BD teams, fairly big teams of lawyers and attorneys and brand managers to sit down and talk to each other and make some of these things happen. And of course, with some of the more recent native ad opportunities that you have seen, that sort of heavyweight BD team involvement isn't nearly as necessary. So can you talk to us about what some of the more recent incarnations of native ads are and how that is different from the models you described that were prevalent in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. So before it used to be the game of big players. So a big brand who has a significant advertising budget that they can dedicate, and B, probably creative and business development and legal teams, all of the things you pointed out. On the other hand, for developers, it was also a huge effort because you need to do an extra development, extra design work, again, plus business development and legal, and plus you needed to have a substantial user base in order to attract attention from the brand because you're working with them directly. And so from that point, we actually see transition in the last year and a half or so, where native ads are getting a completely new meaning. And this means that smaller games and smaller brands can collaborate together, but not necessarily directly. So let me just describe how it works. So usually it will boil down to the first model that I described. So you will have natural advertising spaces within the game, like billboards or TV screens, and you will show ads there, but you will not directly work with the advertiser, usually not, but you will actually have an ad tech partner, so an ad network that works either with brands directly or their agencies or DSPs, and in that way you're getting necessary demand for your game. It's much easier because you don't have to work with a lot of brands at the same time, and it's a lot less development effort on your end. So basically a lot less dev effort on my side as a developer, and as an advertiser, I also get more diversified advertising spent. So it's a win-win situation, I would say, for both parties, and it's a lot more scalable.
Yeah, right. And it sounds like with the more recent incarnation of these ads, they're being treated almost as a standardized ad placements, much like rewarded videos would be or interstitials would be. And there's, you're like, right, maybe I have a football game and there's almost a placement that I identify. So any ad can fit in there, right?
Absolutely.
So let's assume an app is considering running native ads. What are some of the questions they might ask to evaluate the opportunity? What should they look for within their app, but also outside when they look at providers to assess whether this is a good fit or not?
Absolutely. So I would say that we are still in early stages of adoption of this format, at least on the side of gaming studios.
Sure.
I would say that we are in, anyone who's implementing native ads at this point is probably an early adopter or even an innovator, and we still have a way to go for this to be more commonly known and used. However, there are things that we already know and should be mindful of if we are even considering running native ads in our game. The first thing I would do is check if my game has these native and natural advertising spaces already where I could show these ads. So think of billboards, pitch-side ads in sports games, racing tracks in racing games, and so on. And even if they are not implemented, so you don't have them, think about, could I add these easily into my game without jeopardizing the user experience? So we're not talking about banner ads and just putting it simply on bottom or top of the screen. Is there somewhere where I could actually implement them and it looks nice?
Sure.
And so if this is the basic thing that you should consider, and then if this proves to be true, truth, then you need to move into other steps and things to consider. First, you need to understand your audience size. Although you don't have to be a multi-million DAU game, you still need to have some decent scale, at least some scale, let's say 100K DAUs, in order for this effort to make sense. And one more thing about the audience, you need to be make sure that your geo distribution is appropriate for this type of format, because we are in such an early stage. Demand and fill rates are going to be extremely low outside of tier 1 countries. So if you don't have users in tier 1 countries, or you don't have a significant number of users, then again, native ads are probably not a thing for you at this point, but things will change. So those are two things that I would consider at first. And then the third thing that I would like to understand when evaluating this opportunity is how many opportunities for showing ads, for getting those impressions I have in the first place. So I need to understand my session length and the number of sessions during the day, and how many times I will have the opportunity in 1 minute or in any amount of time to show an ad. When I have an understanding of that, I need to get inputs, some estimates or assumptions from the ad networks. What are the fill rates that are reasonable to expect per country, and also the CPMs that are reasonable to be expected, in order for me to come up with at least rough but reasonable understanding of the revenue potential for my game. And if all of these things make sense, and if I'm comfortable with moving forward, then so I'm making an informed decision. Okay, yes, this makes sense. Let's move into the implementation phase.
Right. So there are a number of boxes that need to be checked. It sounds like, from does this even feel right for the game?
Yeah.
To whether there's enough of a market, and there's enough of a user base, and whether the partnership is right. And it sounds like the number of boxes they need to check. Out of curiosity, they do have to have an SDK from one of these ad providers.
So my understanding is that the SDK is definitely a requirement. as for the reward video ads or interstitial ads.
Got it. Got it. Cool. And I know you said the fill rates tend to differ by country, and it's still somewhat early on
Mm-hmm.
as compared to some of the other ad formats, rewarded or interstitials. What sort of fill rates, what sort of CPMs, or any other aspects of demand can an advertiser expect via native ads?
Okay, so the first thing, any developer that's considering this should know is that demand is unlike reward video and interstitials, where most of the demand is actually coming from fellow gamers and other gaming companies. In this particular case, demand is coming from non-gaming
Right.
brands. So it's usually consumer brands. With which ad networks are working either directly or through agencies or through DSPs. That's in terms of what kind of ads they can expect. In terms of fill rates, I would say that in tier 1 countries, the fill rates tend to go around 20%, which is much lower than what you're used to get for reward video and interstitials again, but it's an entirely different beast. And in terms of CPMs, I think what's reasonable to expect is CPMs that are 2 to 3 times lower than for rewarded video, which is obviously the best performing format on the ads monetization side. But as more competition comes in, this will probably change as well for the better. But for now, you should just be realistic and keep your expectations lower than for the best performing formats, which are already in such a mature stage of development.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, why do you think that that most of the advertisers on native are brands? Because I would imagine if I could show, as a performance advertiser, if I could show an ad in a football game that gives me access to gaming audience, wouldn't this be a natural fit for performance advertisers as well?
You're right. It can be used for performance as well. The thing is that at the moment, demand that we see, in some cases, it doesn't even require a click.
Yeah.
So it's pure
Right.
awareness campaign. And so it doesn't require a full attention from the user.
Right.
And it can be implemented in more ways and more flexibly than if you required a click or an install. This doesn't mean that all demand is non-clickable. There's definitely both clickable and non-clickable. It's just that, for brands, performance, I would say, at least not at this point, it's not so important as for the video games, where you have a laser precision as to how much money each user is making for you and how much you paid for them. So it's much more data focused than brands.
Right. So this doesn't even elicit clicks from users, which is understandable, given where it lies in the user experience. And you did express the CPMs are lower and the fill rates are lower than interstitials. So do you also find that if a developer were to integrate native ads, is there any way that could cannibalize the interstitials or rewarded, or is this just accretive on top?
So I don't see this as a big concern or even a concern at all, because I feel that these are very different products and very different value proposition for everyone involved. So if you look at rewarded videos, they work in entirely different way. First, you're providing users a reward, and it's user initiated. So if the user wants to interact with an ad, they have an option to do so. And they're getting a reward for that. So if they see another native ad, this will not motivate them less watch a reward video, because they're watching rewarded video in order to get the reward. compared to interstitials, it's also different because for interstitials, it's system-initiated ad. We as developers are forcing these ads to our users. So engagement rates cannot suffer because a user actually saw a native ad. And the click-through rates should not suffer either. And then if we look at banners, this is where we're getting maybe into a dangerous territory. So native ads shouldn't be looked at as a substitute for banner ads.
Sure.
And basically, if you already have banner ads and you want to add native ads as well, then you need to be mindful of that because these formats are much more similar than the ones previously mentioned. And you need to add new ad placements into the game if possible, so not replace them if you want to actually increase your overall revenues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that makes sense to think about this very differently from your other placements. Right? And I know you did say this is still somewhat new, still people are still adopting it. So in terms of revenue opportunities for a developer that's looking to adopt native ads, what sort of incremental revenue lift, even if it's a ballpark, do you think they could anticipate if they started down this path?
I'd say it's a bit tricky to give some general guideline and still not be misleading, either in a positive or a negative way, just because it very much depends on your current implementation of the formats you're using. If you're a hyper casual game, I assume you already have interstitials, you have rewarded video, you're super aggressive with the approach, you have incredibly high ad ARPDAU. So I would say that, you know, in that case, native ads are going to be a lot less significant new revenue stream. But again, ad revenues for these type of games are also much more important. So it might make sense for them to do it. And then if you're a game developer who's very mindful of the user experience and you don't want to show interstitial ads, so you only have rewarded video, you're not super aggressive even with this format, then you're not making huge amounts of money on this. And you know, in relative percentage wise, you're gonna see a bigger increase with native ads. But what I like about this format is that it's not all necessarily about the revenue impact, but also user experience, which is nice. Yeah, they fit nicely, and basically, you know, you're diversifying your portfolio with bringing in ads that are not only gaming related. So it has some benefits to it that are not strictly about the new revenue stream.
Indeed. And also I would imagine, unlike rewarded video or interstitials, they're not taking users out of the app. Right? It's not hitting your retention. It's not taking you, So I think all of that certainly makes sense in that you shouldn't evaluate this just from the perspective of revenue.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. And what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen developers make around native ads?
As we already kind of mentioned a few times, we are at early stages, so we haven't seen so many implementations, or we haven't seen so many mistakes, but that will certainly change, and we still have a lot to learn. I would say there are still a few things that we already know and we can avoid, or we should be mindful of when thinking about native ads and like moving into the implementation phase. First, about the partners. So different partners will be able to provide different value to you. Some of them are not even working outside of Unity engine. So if you're developing your game in some other engine, you need to be mindful that, you know, the partners will not be the same. Also, different partners are at different stages of SDK development, their stability, and so on. So unlike rewarded video, where you have a wide range of networks which have SDKs that are properly tested and at very mature stage. Here you even need to think about that. Is the SDK stable enough? Is it properly tested? And about that integration piece, is it going to be easy enough for me to do it? Also, when it comes to an implementation inside the game, like the part that user is facing, the user interface needs to be done well, and you need to fit those ads natively and properly into your gameplay. And if we're talking about clickable versus non-clickable, you need to make sure that you're implementing things the right way, so you don't end up in a situation where there are a lot of accidental clicks if the ad is very close to the area where user would click because he wants to play the game. So you would need to be mindful of that. And again, going back to the cannibalization piece, if you're running banner ads already, just be mindful of that. So you implement it in a way that it's going to increase your revenue overall.
Right. Certainly there are, especially since this is a somewhat new format, I think developers need to be mindful of a lot of these things, but this absolutely looks like it's a significant incremental opportunity that a lot of app developers can and should consider.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that in the last few months, I've seen several announcements from big gaming companies that actually said, yes, we're moving forward with native ads. So that is certainly somewhat encouraging that we see that big gaming companies are moving in that direction. And there are several examples already where this has already been done and implemented. So it's interesting to see those examples and get some reference as to how it can look like and if it makes sense.
Indeed. Yeah. And I'm certainly excited to see how this shakes up and plays out in the next couple of months and years as we go forward. Uh, Bozo, for now, perhaps this is a good place for us to start to wrap up. Uh, Thank you again for being on the Mobile User Acquisition Show. And for our listeners, again, Bozo is going to be teaching a course on Ad Monetization 101 on the Mobile Dev Memo Academy. We're going to link to that. If this was interesting, if this was instructive to you guys, definitely check out his course to go much deeper on all things ad monetization. For now, thank you so much, Bozo.
Great, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
For more tips, pointers, and strategies from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, or check out our blog, rocketship.hq.com/blog. Thank you.